Today we have with us Faisal Abid. Faisal is the co-founder of Irene, a very interesting tech startup. And we'll get to what he's solving, in this space later on in the show. Extensive work experience in various startups. I mean, right from the time that he was in college, he started exploring problems in different spaces and made amazing impact. He's helped startups. He's helped a lot of developers along the way, and in my opinion, he understands this world really well from the grounds up. And today, being a co-founder, I guess what I want to explore with Faisal is this entire journey of how do you touch upon problems which are worth solving. And sometimes, these problems can be in what we may consider as traditional industries where tech does not play a role, but Faisal is exploring that. So Faisal, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Hemang. How are you?
Good, thank you, Faisal. Let's probably just dive into how things are being solved in the tech world and in startups according to your observations and perspectives. But the first question I want to get into is the biggest challenge I feel as innovators are that you're inspired by many problems. You see opportunities left, right, and center, and I'm guessing as you look at things around you where you're based, you'll find areas where tech can play a major role. So
Yeah,
I don't think it's the lack of problems which is stopping us. But how do you pick that one key problem? I mean, what has your approach been?
I think every day I probably have 10 startup ideas where I'm like, man, I think I can do this. And I've always been that way. And I think everyone has ideas like this. And for a long time, I have tried to do ideas as they came to me. I started my tech career, I guess, in from McMaster, where I stopped going, dropped out, and started a tech business there. And that was idea number one, which was, hey, can we build like a social application marketplace? This was way before Android and iOS. Android didn't even have a paid app store at this time. But one of the things I realized over the years as I built startups, and a lot of them did not work, a couple of them started to work, were the ideas and startups that work well are have a couple key ingredients behind them. Either I am very familiar with the domain space, so like I either have worked in that industry, I understand it very deeply, or um, I somehow through family I understand the space really well, or I am working with someone that understands it well, and I can bring a different perspective to the industry, a breath of fresh air, so to speak. And the other person can bring all the insights and key industry secrets that the industry holds. And if you look at businesses that work throughout, if you look at Uber, Twitter, all these things, all of them have this key ingredient where there's some insight that those founders had that they were able to execute on that idea, that you and I might have had the idea of Twitter, but you and I would have approached it in a fundamentally different way. Perhaps I would have approached it in such a different way. I would have never thought about doing it SMS first. I would have been like, well, SMS doesn't make sense, let's just do it on their desktop, right? But whatever Jack Dorsey and these guys had, it led to Twitter. And so one of those key ingredients is just basically understanding, am I the right person for this idea? And if not, can I work with someone who can complement me, who can fill in the gaps that I don't know? There's that famous Elon Musk story where like before starting SpaceX, he's bought all these books about rocket science and stuff. Not that he became a rocket scientist overnight, but he understood enough to hire the right people that can then go out and build rockets and etc. Elon Musk doesn't understand rocket science probably at all, just in terms of high level, but he understands enough. So similarly, that's how you have to get to these ideas where you go, when we're talking about Irene, the idea of Irene in a nutshell is an online funeral home, which sounds pretty wild if to anyone when I tell them. The way Irene works is we don't have a physical funeral home. We partner up with crematoriums across the country, and you deal with Irene, and Irene can facilitate the entire process of a cremation or aquamation completely online. So you can just stay in your safe space, helping out your family going through loss, and Irene can deal with everything else. Now, the idea came to me when I was in Japan. And I was looking at how Japan was handling Buddhist cremations. And I was wondering, well, that's really cool. How can we do this in Canada? Because no one was doing this in Canada. But I don't have any relationship with the death world. I just know that eventually I will die. But aside from that, I don't know how funeral homes work, what are the different regulations involved, all these different things. But what I do know is I can bring in some piece of technology, artificial intelligence, whatever, to make the entire process good. So I know how to go from user experience, product, all the way up to execution. But what I don't know is how do we get to that execution part, which is getting the funeral home license or anything deep in the industry.
Sure.
And so I started to, I put that idea on the back burner, and I accidentally ran into my now co-founder, Mallory, who was inside of tech as well. She was working at another company, but her parents owned a funeral home. So right away, we had this very deep insight, and she was thinking about something similar to Irene as well. And so we started talking about, well, look how the Japanese are doing this. How can we do something like this in Canada that is similar, but also confined to the rules of Canada, right? We don't want, Canada doesn't have a big Buddhist cremation population. Canada, then the way the Japanese were doing it was sort of like an Expedia marketplace where it was like, I can go and look at all these different vendors. We wanted to be inspired more by like Uber, where Uber, you're not searching for different cars. You're just saying, I just want to go A to B. So can we do something like that where in a very crude way, a lot of investors like to say we're Uber for funerals, which high level, it makes sense. You're just talking to us. We are dealing with all the ops, logistics, everything for you. So essentially, because of the deep insights we had from the industry, from Mallory's end, and the technical expertise that I bring, we were able to start Irene and get it to where we are now.
Very interesting journey, Faisal. On that note, I want to probably dive a bit more into, okay, you spotted an opportunity, but then there is various ways to solve that. And then what does that ideation process look like? I mean, was it you who toyed with that idea? Maybe you ran a bunch of block diagrams or flowcharts, said, okay, no can do, just put that aside. Run into, I guess, your co-founder for Irene, and then does that process begin again? Like, how does that entire journey look like?
Yeah. Well, in a way, I got a bit lucky with coming up with the idea because not that I came up with this specific idea, but seeing the idea, which was where I discovered the idea. The person running that company was a friend that used to work at a company. He was the CEO of a company in Canada, and he was the CEO of this Japanese company. So he gave me a pitch deck of what they're doing, and I was like, okay, I have a pitch deck now. I didn't think much of it because I basically said this is an idea that I just cannot do without some deep industry expertise. It's such a regulated industry, and so I toyed with the idea in the way where I didn't get into flowcharts or something. I just thought about, well, how would it look from the user's perspective? What would the ideal, like if I was going through a loss, what would I want? Right? I just want something just done for me, whether it's an Expedia style marketplace or whether it's Irene as it is now. I didn't know what we were looking at. And then Valerie was doing something very similar on her end. So when we met and we started thinking of this idea, that's when we started to flowchart it out. And what we like to do, and what I've always done for all previous startups is, I like to quickly build prototypes, using like the worst design possible, but I'll just get a prototype up just to see how it physically looks. It takes me about like a weekend sometimes where I'm like, okay, great, a prototype is there. I can click on these buttons and something can happen. Now, is this good enough? And we'll see what happens. A lot of times I realize that, this idea doesn't make sense, or this idea is not exciting enough for me to continue. A lot of times I'm just like, cool, I built it, but like, do I really want to spend 6 months trying to like get customers for this idea? Probably not. It's not that exciting.
Understand. So let's probably take that example for a minute
Yeah.
more. I mean, when you said, okay, fine, let's go with it, I think we have something here. Did you create like was it like an app that you created where you said, okay, here's a potential booking, meaning there's someone, a customer has experienced a loss and they need our help. So from that point, what did that first prototype look like for you?
Yeah, it's funny. First prototype was a web page with like our logo and the name we had come up with, Irene, with like just no thought into like the font or anything. And then we had a type form because I didn't want to build out this whole form. I was like, oh my God, I hate forms. So we just got a type form. You click the button, a type form opened up. You did the entire type form flow and it went to a Stripe checkout. And we weren't live to customers. This was purely internal to see this is how it works. If we do something like this, does it abide by the laws? Are we able to start a whole entire operation like this? And what is missing? So that's when we started to reach out to industry experts like funeral directors. And we said to funeral directors, because we were hiring funeral directors at that time anyway. So we said, this is our flow. What is missing? And then they were able to tell us, well, you need to upload a photo ID, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how the process began, which was first one was just like the most type form crudest thing. And that's what we had. That's what we showed people, potential investors. It's like, look, here's the thing. It's funny because a lot of investors would at that time would say, oh, but where's the technology? I'm like, yeah, I get it. There's no tech right now because we spent a weekend on this. It's a type form, but like here's the potential. And now if you look at Irene, from just the user facing, it's still at the end of the day, you call us or you fill out, but like the entire backend, we've built something called Funeral OS, which completely changes how funeral homes operate because we're able to analyze phone calls in real time. We're able to pick out customer inquiries right away through a phone call. It's all the NLP experience that I've had before. Automate all the documentation, automate understanding where your loved one is. And so we've built out all this tech to assist our funeral directors so they can focus on the families. But back then, when you're starting off, yes, I want to build all this, but when you're ideating, you don't want to go, okay, you know what? Let me just build some sort of like machine learning algorithm for this. No, you just want to put up a type form and something that fakes it just to see does it actually work.
And what was the feedback from the funeral directors like? Because were they
Yeah,
shocked by looking at it that, hey, here's someone who's giving us a web form and app to do this thing? Because it's in their usual world, it would be a phone call or someone visiting them in person,
yeah,
right? And what
yeah.
did
It
their
was
feedback look like?
it was always visiting in person, and what was very interesting was they understood that this is a need. And what's interesting to note is this is pre-pandemic. This was 2018. We were looking at this, and and it took a long time to launch. We launched in October, no, December, November of 2020. So it took a long time, and there's a whole reason I can get into with that. But um, when we started this 2018 and 2019, the funeral directors understood right away that this is a need for the industry. Because if you look at consumers, when you lose somebody, you don't want to go around shopping, you don't want to drive around, you want to be able to be with your family. And so they understood that Irene solved the need, and we had great feedback from the funeral directors, and a couple of them ended up leaving their funeral home and working with us, like where they were working. And so that entire community has been very open and receptive that this is Irene does solve a need. And that's when we knew we had something on our hands because the funeral directors loved it, they understood it, as well as the consumers. We went to what they're called death cafes, and death cafes are not grief support groups. They're essentially a way for people to come together and just talk about death, how their relationship with death, etc. So when we started talking to people and showing them this type form prototype, they said, "Wow, where was this when I lost my mother? Where was this when I lost my father?" And so that was a good signal for us to say, let's continue to proceed. In the past, when I've done stuff, sometimes you'll have people go, yeah, but there's already something else that does this, right? Or, but have you thought about that? And you end up going down this like spiral of like, well, anytime I bring something up, there's always something else that they need. So I'm not really solving a problem at all. It's just always something else. So that ends up being, well, I haven't fully understood the problem. But with Irene, it was, wow, you like, this is what I needed. When do you guys launch? Because so and so is sick, and I want to use you guys. So that was very interesting. It was very sticky right away.
And where did you find these customers? Like in your
Yeah, it was.
locality?
Yeah, so these users were just at death cafes. I don't know if they ever became customers, but they were essentially people that have gone through loss or might be going through loss, and they said, "Wow, Irene was good." Finding customers is the hardest thing, especially for B2C, and especially for something like Irene, because I just can't go on the street and be like, "Hey, are you losing somebody? Can you use Irene?" So you have to be very like, you have to be respectful and understand that you just can't blast Facebook ads everywhere, saying, "Are you losing somebody?" It's more around, "Hey, have you thought about pre-planning? But what about customers who have lost somebody? How do you understand advertising to them?" And so it took a while, and this is part of being an entrepreneur. You just kind of have to learn, because you're running on just two people. So my co-founder and I just learned how to do, advertising. And so we ran very, 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 what's the word, like, we tested a lot of Facebook ads on what copy would work, that was sensitive, that understood the what the family would be going through. So we ran it on Facebook, we ran it on Google, ran it on Bing, and then you just kind of start to understand that, well, you know what, certain channels don't work. Facebook might not work. Facebook's not bringing customers that can convert right now. But we have customers on Google Ads that are searching for, because they just lost somebody, that might call us and say, "Hey, tell me about Irene." And so, convincing customers is always hard. It's just the A/B testing process, and there's not a lot of data. It's not like you have thousands of data points to do a true A/B test. It's purely intuition A/B testing, which is like, I think this is going to work. Let's change our copy. Like, we used to have customers on our website who used to always ask about our pricing, but the pricing page is right there on our website. So we realized that, hey, maybe instead of having the pricing page at the top, maybe we make it into like a panel that's right on the web page, right? So it's not so much of an A/B test as much as an intuition, is that maybe that's why customers are asking. They just can't find it. So you just have to like play around with a lot of these things really, really fast
I
when you
feel it's
have like
also
two
an
data.
industry. So it's also an industry and an event where your customer is likely going to be stressed out. I mean,
Exactly.
they're grieving. They don't, even if it's in front of their eyes, they may not spot it.
Yes.
So just
That's the
doing that thing with, yeah.
that's the exactly, and that's the hardest part about Irene is, as an engineer, this is one of the first times I have to really, really think about all the edge cases, because when you're working for any other tech startup, an edge case happens, it's not the end of the world, right? Like, okay, the person gets trapped in like some sort of like logic loop where they keep going through the same forms over and over again. But with Irene, the customer's already in a vulnerable state. We want to help the customer go through this journey a lot easier. We don't want to frustrate them. And any sort of frustration, whether it be a pop-up or something weird, can throw off the entire customer experience. So there's so much like thought put into each page, understanding all the different edge cases and use cases, and really thinking about like, here's an edge case we're deliberately not going to deal with, but if it does happen, how do we get around it? And so it's a very very interesting to engineer a problem like this.
So I'm guessing that solving for the problem of let's say GPS location and matching it to the nearest funeral service provider. I think those are engineering challenges, but they can be solved. But because your customer is also grieving, is there a requirement to have a strong human presence that can keep answering their questions? I mean, do they want that kind of
Yeah.
support from you also?
Yeah, absolutely. So we what we do is we don't even do the GPS matching. We're just partnering directly with crematoriums, and so we know that if the customer's in a certain area, then yeah, it is sort of GPS matching. But we know if the customer's in like North Ontario, then we have great partners there that we'll just reach out to, because they're working with us. But to your point of sorry, what was your question? I just lost
I mean, do they
my
want
train.
to talk to a human who says that, hey, walk
Yes,
me through
yes, of
this
course.
process, how will this work? And,
Yeah. But so to your point of talking to people, we we wanted to make sure that's front and center, because at least maybe our kids generation will only want to talk to just like completely online, but like humans want to talk to other humans. So we have a 24-hour hotline where anyone can call us at any point. If you lose somebody at 4 a.m. in the morning, you can call us. You'll have a licensed funeral director pick up the phone, and this is where the magic happens, where the licensed funeral director picks up the phone, talks to you, and can, proceed with next steps. However, the licensed funeral director doesn't have to be sitting there with a notepad and all these different things, because as soon as they call, it goes through our system, Funeral OS, and we start to record the call, analyze the call, extract all the relevant information from the call, so that the funeral director just has to review and say, yes, this is it, and it starts the entire process automatically. So we've made the lives of the funeral directors much, much, much easier, so that they can spend more time focusing on the family and taking care of the family versus having to deal with paperwork and logistics and all that stuff.
so if you can segue slightly and maybe using even Irene as an example, I mean, uh, so we've had, in the past couple of years, a few deaths in the family, and those have been events where we had to rely on word of mouth. You ask someone that,
Yeah,
hey, who did you use for this thing? And that person will give you a recommendation, and whether it's
yeah,
for things that you have to get, or let's say to go to the crematorium, it's all word of mouth. And
yeah,
there was at no point did anyone ever think of, hey, here's an area where tech can make a difference.
yeah,
And I'm guessing you deal with that challenge a lot.
yeah.
So how do people who are exploring solutions in the offline world, how do they deal with such challenges?
Well, referrals are a big part. The hardest part, like if you go back to convincing customers, is getting that first customer. Because if you are able to give that first customer, if you look at Irene reviews, 5 stars throughout, because each customer is like the most important customer to us. And so when we have a customer, we want to make sure that customer's entire journey at Irene is 5 stars, so that in the future, if someone like you asks them, hey, what did you use, I've just lost somebody, they can tell Irene, right? They can recommend Irene. So the hardest part is getting that initial customer and making sure that they're happy. If you've done a good job at making a customer happy, then you just have to rely on goodwill in a lot of cases, where they're going to go out and refer to their family members that when something happens, you should use Irene, and that happens a lot. Monthly we have so many referrals now, where families are like, just use Irene, and sometimes referrals are across the country, because we serve all of Canada, most of Canada. We'll have people from like BC say, hey, a friend in Ontario told us about Irene. We want to use Irene.
Wow. So it and if you can touch about this regulatory hurdle, because I think this is where
Yeah.
regulations can play a big role, right? So uh, was it as simple as learning from, let's say, your few trusted funeral directors and following the guidance, or do you have to continually keep updated yourself with like someone who knows this regulation landscape as it keeps on evolving?
The regulation landscape specifically for funeral services, it's not that it's evolving, but it is built for a different generation. If when these acts were written, everything was written, you didn't have computers or mobile phones as accessible as they are now, right? Like, now you can technically live your entire life without a laptop. That was unheard of just 15 years ago. You could have never done that. And so the hard part in the regulatory hurdles were just convincing the regulatory bodies that Irene is no different than any other funeral home. Our approach is a lot more modern. We have technology, but at the end of the day, we're providing the same service, the same transparent service as any other funeral home. In fact, we are very transparent when it comes to our pricing, and you can see you have insight into the entire process as a family member. And so the regulatory hurdles were really around that, which is why it took us a while to get our license. Essentially, we had like the technology, everything built out. It was more around, hey, regulatory body of such and so province, here's, we understand that you've written the regulation with these things in mind, and this is what we're doing. It's something new, but at the end of the day, it's right for the consumer.
So, in your, is it right to say it's been a 5-year journey, at least for Irene?
Yeah, 2018, 2019. Yeah, exactly. Wow, I didn't even realize 5 years. It looks like we just started this like yesterday.
Yeah. So in these 5 years, and even prior to that, you've had
Yeah.
a bunch of roles at different startups. And I'm sitting here in Bangalore, where the Indian startup landscape is just booming.
Fantastic.
We are
Yeah,
people looking at opportunities which are traditional, that where tech can not necessarily disrupt, but tech can be the glue. Where, let's say, a customer in a small market is able to cater only to his or her local audience, but with tech, they can ship, let's say, all across India. And that's sort of, I guess, the disruption that you brought in as well to what you're doing with Irene, at least. What would, let's say, your observations, like, where do you see startups, things that they do well and things that they probably should do better?
Focus on the customer. A lot of times, the problem with companies is that they have really, really cool technology that I'm like, wow, I wish I built that. But it doesn't solve a problem, because customer, at the end of the day, your customer, whether it's a B2B or B2C or whatever, the customer needs a problem solved. Like, think about all the apps you download. You probably actually don't even download many apps anymore, because most of your problems on the phone are solved. But when you do download an app, you use it because it's solving a problem, not because it was built with Golang in the back end or uses AI or machine learning algorithms. No, the customer doesn't actually care about React or Svelte or anything. The customer cares about, is this solving my problem? A lot of times, including myself, when I started like in this industry 15 whatever years ago, a lot of times people conflate those two. And if you look at 18-year-old me or 20-year-old me was like, I got to make sure this scales up, because it needs to like scale up on like an AWS cluster using Redis and session keys and whatever. The customer doesn't care about that. The customer wants to just solve a problem. So focus as much energy as you can on actually understanding if you're solving a customer problem. The backend can be written in like the worst code ever. If you look at how Irene was coded in 2018 and how it's coded now, night and day. 2018, I hacked together this entire thing just to make it work. Then once we started getting our first customers, I did a complete rewrite, because I was like, that's not scalable, and now we're scaling up. But if I had spent all this time and energy doing what I did now, if I invented Funeral OS and all these automations for the long time, for like the first 30 customers, our funeral directors did everything by hand on the back end, because we didn't know if this was an idea worth pursuing. So we just focused on solving the customer experience. I told the funeral directors, I promise I will automate this entire thing for you all. But right now, you just need to spend a lot of time doing this. And it's not like we had a lot of customers when we first started. We were doing 2 or 3 cremations a month back in 2020. Now we're doing, I don't know, like 200 something cremations a month. So like it's like in a month. So if I had built all these like algorithms and systems because it was cool. Because as an engineer, I'm like, that's really fascinating. 2 years ago, it would have been completely wasted on two cremations a month. Like that's it, whatever, right? So the focus always has to be on how do we solve the customer's problem first, then comes all the technology and all like the interesting parts of tech scaling, AI, all that stuff. Problem number one: figure out what the customer needs.
Thank you. And I fully agree with you because that's something which uh, I see a lot of startups do in the world that I live in, wherein they might be completely focused on the tech, and you have to probe to them that, hey, what is the key problem that you're solving? And if you can't get to that very quickly, then it just means that whatever solution you have is going to get you to a local minima. It won't solve it completely
Exactly.
for them. So the customer will be unhappy, and worse is if they get a bad experience, then they won't be inclined to partner with you after you fully solve it for them.
Of course, of course. The second, if they don't doesn't fully solve their problem, then they go, well, it kind of broke anyways. I'm just gonna uninstall this app. I'm never gonna come to this website. I won't tell anyone about it. And you kind of lose face because you hyped it up as like this amazing thing, which you always should hype it up, but you didn't actually have anything backing it. It was just like it just was cool tech, not a problem being solved.
Hey, this is a great discussion, Faisal. I mean, I just deeply admire the work that you brought in into creating Irene, and of course, your body of work prior to that is also equally fascinating. But this one is one area where you brought a good tech solution to an industry which people are not that comfortable speaking about. But it's
Yeah,
also one of those things where you know it's a known thing, right? If there's only one guarantee is that we are going to leave this earth at some point of time,
absolutely.
and if something can make life easy for our loved ones as they take care of these situations, then then they can look up to what Irene is doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all this. And I'm pretty sure that all the listeners who tune in, they'll get a lot of insights as to how do you think about a problem deeply? How do you care about the customer? And it's okay, like you said, that if your first solutions are not that great, there's room
Yeah.
for optimization, but it's okay, solve it.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
it's an iterative process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much, Faisal, for joining me here today. And
Thank
I
you.
wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, Faisal.